What are social problems? Let's find out. I'm Danielle McCartney, and today in Global Social Problems, we're going to define what social problems are. Social problems are complex, systematic patterns of behavior and social conditions that cause physical, economic, cultural, environmental, or psychic harm, and that are often recognized as problems to be solved by the wider society. We're going to break that down a little bit. So first thing, social problems are not personal problems. So personal problems are private. There are problems that we are directly and personally aware of. They have to do with our immediate relations with other people. Social problems are more public. They result from organizational, social institutions, the organization of society. So personal problems are things that you know and you experience. Social problems are outside of you. The biggest problem with this is that you experience social problems, or individuals experience social problems. And that creates challenges because how do you know if it's your personal problem or if your personal problem is actually symptomatic of a larger social problem? There's an additional challenge with this. In our culture, in many Western cultures, we tend to adopt a victim-blaming approach to social problems. That means that we tend to blame the person that is experiencing a problem as if that problem was their own problem. It's their own fault and responsibility. And when it comes to social problems are the fault and responsibility of the structure of society. So in sociology, we tend to take a systems blaming approach. That means we look at the conditions of the system and try to analyze what is happening in the system that's causing an individual to experience whatever that problem is. C. Wright Mills talked about this kind of a problem of the victim blaming approach versus a system blaming approach. He said, seldom aware of the intricate connection between the patterns of their own lives and the course of world history, ordinary people do not usually know what this connection means for the kind of people they are becoming and for the kinds of history making in which they might take part. What they need is a quality of mind that will help them to see what is going on in the world and what may be happening within themselves. He called this the sociological imagination. So he coined this term to refer to the ability to see how our personal circumstances are connected to the broader society. And sociology is designed to help you cultivate a sociological imagination, for you to see how your personal experience fits within the larger pattern of society. Okay. Now let's talk about what social problems are. Let's break down that definition. So the first part of that definition, social problems are complex, systematic patterns of behavior and social conditions. What does that mean? That means that social problems live in social institutions. What does that mean? Well, social institutions are complex and enduring, taken for granted, self-perpetuating, organized patterns of behavior that create and maintain social order by defining social relationships and our worldview or our philosophy of life. We're going to talk more about this. I know it's still complicated. Social institutions are the routines, habits, expectations, and the belief systems that supply those behaviors with meanings. Let me give you some examples. So social institutions are things like the family, the government, education, the economy, media, religion, science, and technology. All of these social institutions organize our everyday behavior. If you're a student, you know what time you have to get up in the morning, where you have to be because you are going to school. You have certain mindsets, certain behaviors, certain activities you do because you are a student. That's governed by the social institution of education. And likewise, all of these other social institutions create habits and patterns of behavior that organize our life and tell us what to do or influence the way that we act. And this is where social problems live, in these kinds of institutions. Now, like I said previously, you're still affected by that. You still act out of that, and you still feel and experience that. That's where the kind of challenge comes when we're talking about social problems and personal problems. But still keep thinking now about, is your personal experience, say you're encountering some problem. So let's an example. If you're unemployed, let's say that you don't have a job. If you are unemployed because you don't like the jobs that are listed, that are posted, you don't have the qualifications for the jobs that are posted, you want a different kind of a job in a different sort of a place, maybe that's a personal problem. Like you are making a choice that you don't want these jobs or you aren't interested in what's currently available. On the other hand, if the jobs that are posted, if the qualifications are unreasonable, if the conditions of employment are inequitable, if the types of jobs that are available don't match the types of skills and qualifications that workers have, that becomes a social problem. That's not about individuals not wanting a job or being unable to get a job. That's about the structure of society not providing the kinds of jobs that people can hold in that society. So the next part of that definition, social problems cause physical, economic, cultural, environmental, or psychic harm. So they are harmful. In sociology, we have a concept called life chances. Life chances are our ability to achieve the good life. So your culture defines, your society defines the good life in a particular way. So in the US, this is like this stereotypical house with a white picket fence and a nice car and a good job and good education, those kinds of things. That's the quality of life that you expect. Now, if there's something in the social institutions that are preventing you from achieving that good life, then that's causing you harm. That's causing you economic harm or your physical harm or your emotional, mental harm. It's impeding your ability to live that good life. That's part of the characteristic of social problems. This part of the definition of social problems is objective. That is that we can measure harm. We can measure physical harms, economic harms, cultural harms, and so on. And sociologists and other social scientists have accumulated a body of evidence and data about these kinds of harms. So people who are experts, people who are trained in data collection and analysis, look at patterns of harm, and we can document this behavior is causing harm. It's preventing people from getting jobs, if we go back to that same example. So this part of the definition of social problems is objective. We can measure the harms that are caused by social problems. But one of the things that makes it difficult to define social problems is this part of the definition, that social problems are often recognized as problems to be solved by the wider society. This is complicated because not everybody recognizes something as a social problem, as a problem that needs to be solved. So you might think that some pattern of behavior is really harmful. It's harmful to you, it's harmful to other people that you can see. You can see evidence of that harm, but other people in society, particularly people with the power to make decisions and laws and regulations, may not recognize that as a social problem that needs to be solved. So this is where this subjective part of social problems and the definition of something as a social problem comes in. So ask yourself, and like others have, what counts as harmful? There's a behavior, you determine that's harmful. Is it universally recognized as harmful? Do most people recognize it as harmful? This is part of the subjective question. So not everybody's going to recognize a pattern of behavior as harmful. And then how many people? If you recognize that it's harmful, how many people have to be harmed for it to be recognized as a problem that needs to be solved? That's kind of a challenge, and there's lots of people that can look at the same problem and decide differently about these questions. This part of the definition of social problem links to what we call in sociology the social construction of reality. So the idea with the social construction of reality is that our reality is determined by how we recognize things, that we learn from each other about what things mean, how we act in the world, and that it is a social construction that we decide this is what our society looks like. So in some cases, harm can be considered a social problem because it contradicts cultural values. So a particular culture values a particular behavior or pattern of behavior, and that is not being met. So that culture is going to say that is a social problem. If we're not able to access certain social institutions, certain religious organizations perhaps that are being shut down or banned by other groups. If the culture has a value of religious pluralism, then they might say that's a problem for our cultural value. We want to solve this social problem that people don't have access to these different types of religions. In this idea of social construction of reality, a social problem might exist when the actual conditions contradict with the ideal conditions. So we all have ideas about how we believe we should be in the world. That's our ideal condition of our social reality, things that we really want. But in real life, maybe we aren't meeting those expectations. Maybe our society isn't able to help us meet those expectations, or something else is happening that's preventing us on the ground from actually achieving this idealized vision of what the good life is. So let's talk about, why do social problems happen and how can we fix them? We're going to talk here about sociological theory. So what is a theory? A theory is a system of ideas that explain, predict phenomena, or social relationships. So there's a theory that explains why something is happening and how it's related, which then implies if that's the way things are related, then we know how to fix them. There are three major theoretical schools in sociology: the structural functionalist school, social conflict, and symbolic interactionism. So a little bit on each one. Structural functionalism. According to structural functionalism, society is a stable, orderly system of interrelated parts of those social institutions. All the social institutions are connected and interrelated. Society is overall stable. According to functionalists, society functions by consensus. That makes it functional. We are participating in society. We consent to this social organization and we live in that social organization, and that makes it work. That means that society functions based on consensus because we enact in daily behavior that supports an existing structure. That means that we consent. According to structural functionalism, not only is social change slow, it should be slow, because if society is formed based on consensus, it takes a while for everybody to agree. It takes a while for us to agree that this is the way that society is and this is the way that it should change. So social change is possible according to structural functionalism, but it is designed to be slow, to get people on board, to help people understand what the changes are, and to adapt to changing conditions in society. This perspective, structural functionalism, emphasizes solidarity, us feeling like we are in it together, so collective values and beliefs. According to functionalism, what works in society is when people are on the same page, when we collectively believe that certain things are good and right and other things are bad or wrong. That helps society function. According to functionalism, social problems are dysfunctions in institutions. That means that the social institution was designed to work a particular way and it's not accomplishing the function that it's supposed to serve for social order. So take, for example, education. Structural functionalism would consider a social problem in education if the system of education did not educate young people about what they needed to know about the society, prepare them for the job market, give them the rules and values of society so that they could then get a good job and contribute to the economic social institution. So if the educational system is not able to do that, then that's a dysfunction, that's a social problem that then needs to be fixed. The system of education needs to be fixed. One of the things about functionalism is that all these social institutions are interrelated. So frequently, according to functionalism, what happens is if one institution is underperforming, other social institutions pick up the slack. So say in that instance, for education is underperforming, let's say that education is not providing the skills and values and training that students need to participate in the economic sphere. Then other social institutions will make up for that. So then maybe the social institution of the economy will then provide more trainings, more workshops, more onboarding to help people function better in the economic sphere, because the educational sphere is not providing them with the skills and values that they need to be successful in the economic sphere. Okay, next up, social conflict. So social conflict is kind of on the opposite end of functionalism. Social conflict argues that society is comprised of different groups with different interests that compete for power and resources. So you remember, functionalism is about consensus and interconnection. Conflict is about tension and conflict. So according to the conflict perspective, Inequality, that's power, wealth, race, gender, other kinds of inequalities, actually drive social institutions. So from functionalism, it's that we all work together, right? All the social institutions are interconnected. From the conflict perspective, it's actually all of those social institutions and the individuals in them are in conflict. They're trying to get their own way. They're trying to make their values and beliefs be the dominant one. They're trying to get more power. They're trying to get more resources. That's the sort of conflict. And how those conflicts are resolved is what creates the structure of society. So according to the conflict perspective, social problems result from exploitation. It's from people and groups in power that are trying to exploit the people and groups that are not in power. So it's a big difference. From functionalist perspective is about everything gets along, we all work together, we all consent the social structure. Conflict says we don't get along, we are actually fighting each other for power, and it's whoever has the most power that gets to control what society looks like. Okay, according to the conflict perspective, change can happen, but change tends to be radical, and it tends to be quick. So radical structural change is necessary to solve social problems. From the functionalist perspective, people can talk things out, we can kind of work together, come to a consensus about how society should change very slowly, gradually over time. From the conflict perspective, says that you can't get there because society is based on the tension and the conflict over power, so you're not going to be able to come to a satisfactory solution for everyone. It's the people who have power who are going to win. That means that there needs to be some really radical change to the structure. It has to be a very different looking social structure to actually solve social problems. Last one, symbolic interactionism. This one's a little interesting because it's a little different from the rest of them. According to symbolic interactionism, society is created by the interactions and symbolic exchanges of individuals and groups that create systems of meaning. So this means that the way that we interact with each other and how we understand the meaning of that interaction creates our society. So I'll go back to education. Remember the last time you were in the classroom, you probably knew what to do. If you were a student, you sat in a particular way, you acted a particular way, you said and did particular things. If you're a teacher, you stand in a different place and you act and do and say different things. We understand that because we understand what it means to be a student, what the expectations are for students, what students will do and not do, and we understand what it means to be a teacher. It can be other things that are really quite simple. Like if I were to come up to you and I'd stick my hand out to you like this in the US, you would probably stick your hand right back out and then we would shake hands. I don't have to come up to you and stick out my hand and be like, you got stick your hand, we're gonna shake hands now. Because of that pattern of interaction that has happened over your lifetime, you have learned that that's what that means. Somebody sticks their hand out, they're gonna shake your hand. That's the greeting that we do in the US. The interesting part of symbolic interaction is this created part. So the Thomas theorem argues that situations that we define as real become real in their consequences. That means that we create a certain set of interactions and then we make them real because we engage in those interactions. The way that we act creates exactly what we expect to happen. So for example, that handshaking thing, if I come up and put my hand in front of you to shake your hand and you shake my hand, now that has become a real interaction. We have just greeted each other in an approved fashion and then we both go away with understanding that that is how you greet people. So according to symbolic interactionism, social problems are patterns that violate deeply held values and beliefs. So we get to know each other, we understand our values and beliefs through the patterns of exchanges, interactions, and that shows our cultural or social belief systems. If a pattern of behavior, if a social institution is violating those kinds of values and beliefs, then we will agree as a society, this is a problem that needs to be solved because it's violating our beliefs. Symbolic interactionism is less interested in solving social problems in particular and more in understanding how something became a social problem, how it is interacted with, how we decide what we're going to do about that social problem. So there are some theorists that talk about social problems stages. First stage is societal recognition. That means that there's this process where larger members of society have to come to recognize that this is actually a problem. If they then recognize that it's a problem, then the next stage is social legitimization. So then we have to legitimize that this is a social problem. We have to agree that we recognize that it's one and it's a legitimate social problem. Then there's this mobilization stage where other actors will try to tell people this is a social problem. We have to solve this social problem. Everybody has to go out and do something to solve this social problem. That's part of the social movement's mobilization. After that point, then there's an official plan of action. So then people in power have a policy, they have a law, they have a rule or regulation that says, we're going to solve this social problem. We're going to do 1, 2, 3 to solve this social problem. So that's where we're going to stop for now. So let me know what your questions or comments are. Please post them in the comments and I will get back to you as soon as possible. I'll see you next time.